What is up, you guys? Welcome to today's video. In today's video, I will explain the difference between a training routine that is geared towards hypertrophy, that is geared towards building muscle mass, and a training routine that is geared towards fat loss to make you leaner. A lot of people are of the misconception that if you want to build muscle mass, that you have to focus on lifting very heavy weights, that if you want to lose body fats, that you have to focus on lifting very light weights for an insanely high number of reps. And the harsh reality is, guys, that a training routine that is focused on building muscle or training routine that is focused on losing body fat actually isn't any different from each other. Because if you are trying to gain muscle, you have to focus on getting progressively stronger in a rep range that allows you to use heavy enough weights to stimulate the optimal amount of hypertrophy on a set percent basis for a certain amount of volume on a weekly basis. And that stimulus that you give your body will be responsible for the muscle protein synthesis response that your body uses to build muscle mass. Basically, it adapts to the training stimulus that it is given by building more muscle mass, and that comes through a calorie surplus combined with eating enough protein to give your body the necessary building blocks to build muscle mass. Now, if you want to lose body fat, you have to keep giving your body that same response of being able to lifting heavy weights so that it will hold on to its muscle mass when you get into a calorie deficit. When you go on a calorie deficit, you give your body less energy. And if you would not lift weights, you would lose weight in both the form of muscle and fat mass. But if you apply resistance training, the same stimulus that you've used to build up your muscle mass, your body will give your muscles the signal to hold on to its muscle mass because it should be able to keep performing the task of lifting heavy weights. And if you decrease the weight that you use and use an insanely high number of reps, I'm talking about over 30 to 50 reps here, then you will inevitably lose muscle mass because you are not training hard enough, because you are not lifting with a percentage of weight of your previous 1 rep max that is necessary to hold on to the muscle mass you have built on your muscle gaining phase. So don't fall into the trap of lowering the weights. Don't fall into the trap of listening to old school advice that will simply make you smaller and weaker. Now, the goal of going on a muscle building phase where you eat more calories is to get progressively stronger, and that will be the results of the amount of hard sets you do on a weekly basis. Over time, you will get stronger. The goal of going on a phase where you focus on losing body fat to reveal more muscle definition is to maintain your strength levels. It's not necessarily to gain strength. Of course, if you gain strength on a fat loss phase, that's great, but it most likely won't happen if you are past the intermediate phase of your lifting career. The goal should always be to maintain as much strength as possible by keep lifting heavy weights in a 5 to 15 rep range. And that would be 5 to 10 reps for your compound exercises and 8 to 15 reps for your isolation exercises. That will be optimal for most people. And yes, you probably will lose a little bit of strength on a fat loss phase because you give your body less calories, which means that there will be less glycogen stored in your muscles, which means that you operate on less fuel. That amount of strength loss that you experience won't be and I'm only talking about a couple of percentages, like between 2 and 5% maximum if you do things right. That will simply be the result of having less energy stored in your muscles and not necessarily of having lost muscle mass. So in essence, guys, there really isn't a difference between lifting for hypertrophy and lifting for maintaining muscle on the fat loss phase. And that is the key word when you go on the fat loss phase: maintaining muscle mass. There is one small difference that could be put into your training routine, and that is something volume related. When I talk about volume, I'm talking about the number of weekly hard sets that you perform in order to gain muscle or maintain muscle. When you are in a calorie surplus and you have more energy, you can get away with performing more hard sets per week near failure because your body is able to recover faster due to the increased amount of calories. But when you are on a fat loss phase, you essentially simply try to maintain muscle mass. And it has been scientifically proven that if you want to maintain muscle mass, that it only requires 1/3 of the amount of volume that you've used to build up that amount of muscle mass that you currently have. So for example, if you have used, let's say, 12 sets on a weekly basis in order to build up the muscle mass that you currently have, it only requires about 4 weekly sets and 10 sets near failure to maintain that amount of muscle mass. Now, am I saying that you should only perform 4 sets? Am I saying that you should only perform 1/3 of the amount of volume that you've used to build up your muscle mass? No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that if you are going on a fat loss phase, try to maintain the same number of sets per week that you've used to build up your muscle mass, because you are simply keeping up with the amount of workload that you are trained to perform. Your work capacity should not suffer. Your work capacity should stay high even on a cutting phase. However, most likely when you've lost a significant amount of weight or when you are near very low body fat levels, I don't recommend going too low. Between 8 and 12% is optimal in my opinion. But it could happen that when you dip below 10%, that you will notice that you get fatigued a little easier, that you get fatigued a little quicker. And if, for example, you would perform 12 sets on a regular basis, you could dial it down to, for example, 9 sets per week. Eliminating 1 set can help with your recovery. It won't hinder maintaining strength. It won't hinder it won't be a major issue that will lead to muscle loss. In fact, you can, just like I said, maintain your strength and your muscle mass on 1/3 of the amount of volume that you've used to build it, but reducing it slightly when you are near the end of your cutting phase can help with recovery. And I don't recommend going too low in volume, even if you can get away with it from a muscle preserving point of view, because it's important to keep a certain amount of work capacity, because when you then switch over to a muscle building phase again, then you can increase the volume slightly again, but you won't have to bust your ass to get up your work capacity again. So guys, that is pretty much it. The summary of this video is that you have to perform a certain amount of volume of hard sets per week in an optimal muscle building rep range, which is 5 to 10 reps for compound exercises and 8 to 15 reps for your isolation exercises. And when you are switching over from a muscle building routine to a cutting routine, simply try to perform a high enough workload to keep your work capacity, but the most important thing is that you maintain your strength and that you keep lifting the same weights that you've used on your muscle building phase. So don't fall for the trap of reducing the weight and lifting an insane high number of reps, because that will inevitably lead to muscle loss. Try to maintain your strength. Guys, if you value the information I've just given, give me a thumbs up, share the video with somebody who might not agree with this or who might benefit from hearing this information, and stay tuned for the next one. Take care.